All right, welcome to a kind of inaugural podcast or video series on advanced development, this time in Odoo 12. So we are joined here by Brett. Say hello, Brett.
Hello.
Awesome. And we're going to be working on a small project where we're going to make a module whose purpose is to make it possible for Odoo itself to tell the web client that it needs to paginate to the next record, just like pressing this button here. But in reality, what we want is to be able to get that to just happen automatically when we press a button, or rather a successful kind of event on something like validate here. All right, so to get things started with that, I think that we're going to be generally writing JavaScript code. So let's start with making a module. My thinking here is probably going to be to name it web something because it is a web client. What do you think about that?
I would agree with that.
All right, so what do we want to call it? Like web underscore
maybe web Auto-Paginate or something.
Okay. All right, so we're obviously going to need a lot of stuff that we can probably just take from over here. So this manifest will pull open. Oh man, it has more data than an average manifest, that's for sure. So we're going to need an init, even if it's empty, just to load JavaScript to make it a module. Remember, don't ask me. All right. So in our manifest, let's clean this up. We'll say web Auto-Paginate 12.0.1, and I'm going to take away the entire description key for the time being. We can always come back around to it. So we are going to depend on web, and we are going to have some data views, installable, auto, and category hidden. Category hidden, we have category tools up here, so it's a little weird. Maybe we want category hidden. Let's check to see if that's a category actually before doing that. What's your favorite way to tell if there's a category, Brett?
I usually just check in a UI and see what categories are generally available.
I 100% agree. So I usually group by category and then maybe take off this. Now the real question is, this is going to be in alphabetic order. So is there a category named hidden?
Not seeing.
No, I'm not either. So I don't think that one's going to work out. Meaning, if we used category hidden, we would have a category hidden eventually. But let's go ahead and use tools. In fact, what's this? Oh, it's not even ours. Good, thank God. So we will use tools with an S on the end because everyone else does, except for that one. But that's not ours, so we'll ignore it. So we'll take off this category hidden down here at the bottom. We'll allow the tools one to come into play. All right, so let's go ahead and copy our views folder over. And what do we got? All right, so that's not even the right name. So obviously I did a little copy paste magic the last time and ended up with a name from Shipbox. Let's call this web Auto-Paginate assets, not so much fields. Let's just say assets. That's fine. Assets background. At the end of the script, we're going to add our module name whenever we're doing this. So this can be web Auto-Paginate static source JS, and then in here we'll use maybe just action.js or actions.js, maybe something like that. All right, so we could obviously copy over this one, but that's probably not going to be as good as just recreating it. So we will new file, and we can put the whole folder in here. So we'll say static src js /actions.js, and we will create all those in a list. All right, so when we start any sort of JavaScript, what we're really going to do is use the odoo.define. And do you know the parameters to that?
Yep, we put the module name first and a dot, and then some kind of definitive key for what we are something descriptive maybe toward what we're doing.
Yeah, let's say, well, this could actually just be as simple as action
I
or
think action.
actions or something like that, because of the fact that our file is, and we have our namespace already with that part there.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what the second argument is?
The second is a require, or a function with a require in it.
Yeah, is right. So it's basically a function. Wow, that did a lot of autocomplete for me that I wasn't expecting with the whole brace and everything. But yes, it's a function that takes a parameter called required. That is going to be the function that you actually use to do your magic. Use strict, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Something very similar to that. Use strict, perfect. All right, try to stay out of here. All right, so we're going to need to if I'm going to do it the way that I hope to do it, which will be to basically just make an action, then I'm going to need to require action. So we'll say var abstract action require web.abstract action. And that's going to be the class that we're going to inherit. I don't know that much about the actions, but I do know that to be able to get the action, meaning the actual abstract action, I don't think that I've ever made one. I've definitely inherited the action manager before to pull apart custom pieces of code. But in the docs, it says we should make a class of abstract action. We should require web core. And then we should essentially bind core dot action registry dot add. And here's the custom tag for the IR clients that we're going to do. So let's do Auto-Paginate. And then we will put our class. So we're going to make a Auto-Paginate. Auto-Paginate action. Abstract action dot extend. Do you happen to know the difference between extend and include?
I do not actually.
So extend basically means that we're going to do what would in most most object-oriented programming languages would be called like inheriting or creating a new subclass. So extend gives us back like a new class. Dot include mixes in or overlays whatever your definition is essentially into an existing class. So if you're extending an existing class and you just want to add a little bit of functionality that won't break existing functionality, then dot include is usually what you want. If you want to do something that probably would break functionality, list-off substitution, all that kind of stuff, then you would do the extend, and then you would have you'd find some other way to replace or do whatever you're going to do. All right. So with that done here, we can finish that piece here, and this whole thing forms what would be called like a module pattern in JavaScript, which really means that we're going to have something that gets run when the file loads essentially, and it needs to return something. When we are saying define this key here, what we're really saying is define whatever we return out of this evaluation. So we need to return either just the action itself, which does happen, so we could do that, and that would be perfectly valid. I did name this one actions though, thinking maybe in the future we might need some other ones as well. So in that case, I'm going to actually return a dictionary or a JavaScript object, I guess you could say, and I will have the key be abstract, or not abstract action. What am I thinking? Auto-paginate action as my values. And therefore, if we end up adding more values in here, then more actions, I guess you could say, then we will, add them to this list, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right, let's try to see if we can't just jump to this. No, we can't. Of course not. All right, so let's go find the way abstract action looks and feels, and then we will pick it up from there. So in Odoo, that's going to be in add-ons web all the way down here. Static source JavaScript. And let's just search in here for abstract action. Change that to search JavaScript. And an abstract action is actually an extension of widget. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed that they had somewhat divergent parent trees and things like that. Just based on what I know actions and stuff to do, I didn't think that there was going to be a widget. So what do we want to do with this? We don't really want to render. And now I'm wondering if we're going to have to end up including into the abstract or the action handler code to handle it instead of this, because I'm a little concerned that just by even registering this at all means that we're going to be like removing our form. So let's pick this up from the Odoo side, I guess. Really, is we're going to want a way to test this. The easiest way for us to test it is going to be to write a server action or a button or something like that. So let's go test that. So we'll go to the same model that actually, let's get into debug mode and make a server action. Okay, and we can say server actions. We'll create a new one. We'll say test, and we'll put it on stock.picking, as that's the model that we're intending to be kind of our guinea pig here. And we're going to execute Python. And just like it says up here, what we're going to do is we're going to assign an action variable is equal to a dictionary that looks like an action, just like the return value from Python if you were going to make a model method or something that did an action. So we'll say action equals, wow, there's a lot of space between that cursor and where it's typing. Very weird. Okay. I don't know if that white space is okay, but all right. What do you think the cause of that is? The zoom level that I have, or?
Yeah, I mean, Zoom has caused, some weird behavior in various programs for me, so it's hard to say.
All right. Well, we'll just hope that we can do that. So this is going to be type. This is so weird. ir.actions.client. And it just keeps getting further too. That's the best part. It just keeps going off to the right. Oh, that's not
Yeah,
right.
very strange. Maybe it would be more helpful to just write it in PyCharm on a new thing and then copy paste it in when you're done.
Yeah, actually, you're probably correct. Although I'm so close to being done, I think I'm just going to muddle through at this point. So the key that we bound in here is called Auto-Paginate. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. I think that's a good strategy, though. If we, hopefully this will be the last server action that we need to write to test this functionality. All right, so I will open a new tab, mostly just so that if we end up needing to visit that abomination, we'll come back to it real fast. All right, it doesn't really matter which one we go to, although you could argue it does matter because we need more than one record if we're ever to hope our paginate thing to work. We don't have our module installed, so really we can return that action all day long and it shouldn't do anything. Yeah, just nothing happens at all because nothing is set up to take that auto-paginate action. All right, so I guess one more tab and let's go install the app. Do we think we have all of our pieces installed to be able to at least install it? There's a good chance. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
In the manifest. And in manifest, we have the views, which I'm assuming does include our JavaScript.
And it does include the JavaScript, and we have the correct thing here.
Outstanding. Looks good to me.
I think it looks good. We'll try it out. So if we clear this and we don't see it, what's our next steps?
Update that apps list.
Yeah, you know it. So you'd have to be in debug mode. If you don't see that, get in debug mode and then do this. And then we'll just immediately search again and install it. you have any tips and tricks on debugging JavaScript, front-end JavaScript code in Odoo?
Well, most of my debugging has taken place more on the front end, which I think might be a little bit more straightforward in general. But the developer tools are a very good way to get a little insight into what's going on.
Meaning these?
Yep.
Yep. Ooh, look. Ooh, could not find. Oh, I think this was actually from before we installed it. So let's go ahead and refresh. But that's good to know. And let's try that again. And oh yeah, look at that. We load a empty page. So yeah, let's think about this for a second. So I don't really want an action. At least I don't want an action that would be inheriting like a widget, because that's just not what we're trying to do. So I think we might have to back this off and make a more generic return result, and then use the action manager to handle it itself instead of trying to include it into that. All right, so change of plans here. We're no longer going to use an action. Also, I have at least one tip, which is that I personally like to go ahead and do a little console.log with something like web Auto-Paginate actions v1.0 or something like that. Mostly just so that I can make sure at all times that I'm running the current version of the JavaScript and that I don't have some cached or whatever version going on. All right, so we're going to undo quite a bit of this. So we don't want this anymore because that's just not important for us anymore. And therefore, we're not going to want this or this anymore. We may not even need core. Who knows? So we're really taking this all the way apart. So to get a action manager, I'm going to go ahead and peek into Shipbox just because it's one of the places where I know that I've done it already. And that's probably going to be in here. All right, indeed it is. So we're going to require action manager, and we're going to use include this time. And there's a special method called execute close that will be essentially handled whenever an action is going to do that, which ultimately means this is really convenient for us, really. So we'll bring this over to here. We may argue that this shouldn't be called actions anymore. And what we'll see, let's, instead of returning an action that is a client-side action, we'll just return one with an arbitrary key on it. So we'll say if action dot auto-paginate, then let's go ahead and console, or actually let's just say window.debug action equals action. And then we'll be able to see this debug action variable show up, which I think is probably another good tip. All right, we can't do that anymore. So instead, we may just not have any return at all out of this, to be honest. I'm not sure what we would possibly return other than another instance of the action manager. So at this point, we're going to be looking for a couple of things. Number one, I want v1 to show up. Let's go ahead and see if just changing this is good enough. Do you have a vote on that? What do you think? Looks like it wasn't good enough. Let's try restarting Odoo. I've definitely seen just editing JavaScript and it just shows up. It's one of those mysteries in life that I'm maybe too eager to accept as being a mystery, and why sometimes it loads and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I myself have no solution to that mystery at the moment.
Oh, you'll note that the URL got action auto-paginate, which is just one more reason for us to know. Oh, see, now we got no actions and we get our v1 here. So that's so far so good. We're going to need to change this though, because now instead of type IR actions and tag auto-populate, instead what we'll do is we'll just put this as a key. Maybe. See when we go down to the next line. All right. Auto-Paginate true or something like that. 1 doesn't really matter because the whole point is that we're going to be picking up Auto-Paginate in the return result. All right, so with that little change done, we should be able to come back over to any random picking. Let's get this sized up a little bit better. We don't need to see the code usually. Let's get back over to any old picking and run test. And this time we didn't see any output at all, but that's not a bad thing because we should now have a debug action. Oh, it doesn't look like it. Yes, there isn't a window action like that. So what happens? We still set action equals to that and auto-paginate. Is that not our key? Sure, because now we have an underscore. And that's going to be important, at least for kind of the way we want this. Underscore paginate to work. All right, so now we should have a debug action. I wish there was a way to increase the size of this. I don't think there is, though. Unfortunately. All right, so we see essentially this is a close action, or the type, since the type wasn't defined, it automatically decided that it was, which is ultimately why we were able to get down into our particular piece now. So I think we probably know enough at this point to finish her off, but what would be our next steps, do you think?
Well, would we not have to figure out what the paginate action is and then kind of hook into that?
I suppose that's probably not how I'm going to do it, though. Meaning what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to click the button. So this is, it has a O pager next, and we should just be able to use JavaScript to get that. So let's do $ for jQuery, and we'll get button dot O pager next. And we have more than one of them. Let's just see if theoretically the first one dot click is really all we need. And it looks like that is indeed the case. So when we did that, we got to 2. And if we ran that again, we should get to 3. So all we really need to do is say, do we at least have one of these, and then call the click function. So let's go ahead and try that. So instead of setting a debug action here, we'll replace that with $. Oh, I should have copied that. Does anybody know how? I don't know how JavaScript would behave with use strict if we don't have anything. So I'm going to need to save this as a variable. $O pager next. Do you happen to know though, Brett?
It should give you a. I don't know that it'll stop you, but I do believe it'll warn you that you are not using an explicitly assigned variable.
Oh, it would say not explicitly assigned variable, even if we have imperative code that has a 0 length, though. Because I don't think that
so.
would. Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's
I
try
could
it
be
out.
wrong.
Oh, well, we can try that. That's the great thing about the JavaScript console, right? So let's just say nothing, and we get a type error undefined. Yeah, it's pretty close, right? So undefined, it's very mysterious because it's just type error undefined is not an object. But what we're really saying is that the dot click and then the call on dot click is really the undefined object in this case. So it's saying that click is undefined because basically this must have actually given us back something, even if it's just undefined. And it is undefined. And then dot click is undefined as well. Oh, sure. We just can't dereference undefined at all. All right, fair. All right, so we're on the right track here. So we'll make sure that the length of this is greater than or equal to 1. And then we can call that click, which would be $ and pager next. Well, we do ultimately only want the first one, click. All right, so that probably is pretty close. We'll say V2 here and see what we can do about getting that. Oh, look at that right away. Okay, so when we call our test action here, oh, we're going to paginate, but we are only 1 for 1. And we might want to consider what would happen if we got to the end of it, but I'm not going to do that right away here. All right, so when we call this, we should get moving on to the next one, 2 and 3. And so, oh. Well, that's interesting. So when we clicked it, what do you think's happening here?
That is a good question. I can see in the bottom right corner that it is trying to load the action. I'm assuming that maybe it's the that is a very good question. I'm wondering that makes me wonder when we checked for the O pager next and it had return multiple. I wouldn't think it was, but maybe possibly the buttons are actually not the same, meaning that when you paginate, those buttons are being replaced by the next pager button or something like that.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
kind of that's my thought as well. But the part that I'm having a hard time with that in my head is the var here is scoped to this function.
mm-hmm.
So every time we enter into that function, we should be essentially getting the current version of this and then the 0th element of it. And I wouldn't think that that would be really any different than us doing this, which is our original. And well, actually, then again, it didn't move it on to it this time either. So what went wrong with that? So we come in here and we run that, and now we're not paginating anymore. Oh, in fact,
Yeah, it looks as
I
though it's
can't interact with my
disabled.
client at all.
Hmm.
Let's do a little refresh. And what went wrong here? Somewhere in here. And we should be able to call that code. And indeed, every time we call it, we paginate to the next one. So far, so good. So it doesn't have something to do. Okay, so we moved on. But
Yeah, it
now I
looks like they're
can't
being
click
disabled
these.
after we run that action.
Yeah, that's interesting. Probably because we never. No, we do. I was going to say maybe because we never do the super stuff, but we do every time. It's not like we return here or something, which would have been obviously disastrous. Or potentially disastrous, at least, let's say. Bit of a mystery here. So, what shall we do? We know that every time that code runs before the action happens, we can call it over and over, but the code doesn't work afterwards. Do we still have any buttons? Yeah. Otherwise, we would have gotten undefined. Maybe it's not the right button. Although they all look identical. I wonder what the difference is actually between all the next buttons. They appear to have the same class.
If you drop the jQuery, that little triangle down there, is there anything that pops out that
Good
way?
question.
Yeah, I see one button has
Disabled.
one button is a little bit different from the rest, and that one happens to be getting disabled.
Yeah.
And then that's the one that we're targeting. So that kind of, I mean, that makes sense that it's not working, but it doesn't make sense to me why it's getting into a disabled state. Maybe there's something in the JavaScript for that sort of pagination behavior that our action is conflicting with, in that some evaluation is made to determine whether or not it should be able to paginate, and we have broken that somehow.
Just by clicking it though, that doesn't really make.
No, I'm thinking by the action. Our action might be interfering with the evaluation of the pagination's behavior that determines whether or not it should let you paginate to the next page or not.
Agreed. So we wrap it in a timeout then.
Yeah,
right.
pretty much.
Okay. Then we just need callable code, which we could theoretically just do that. 500 milliseconds or so. But we probably want a lambda here, or a function, right? And then that variable would be closed, so that would be fine. Not like that. That should be okay, right?
Yeah, I think so.
One of these days. All right, V3, here we go. Nope. Let me clear caches and refresh too. Yeah, very strange. All right, well, so far we're 1 for 1 on restarting Docker or restarting Odoo and it being right the next time. So let's find out. No, it's not done yet. Give that a shot. All righty. No, well, now we're 1 for 1. Overview, process, 1, action, test. And we're on 2. So far, so good. Test. 3. So far, so good. All right. So we'll wrap back around. I don't think that's going to be a problem, though. All right. So that's basically it. So just that we're kind of extra clear or whatever here, we could definitely work on the validate button. Moving on to the next one. The validate button on stock pickings is actually really not necessarily a great example for this. I don't know which versions of Odoo do it, but button validate, which is what the name of this is here, generally can return a wizard. So when there's nothing done, when you press validate, it will open this immediate transfer wizard. And therefore, it's not really the best one to use that would interact with the way the client works, because ultimately this is the return for that button, which means that we wouldn't really be able to override it without also making a choice on how that works. But we can, we could at least hook onto, say, this cancel button here, action cancel, as a demonstration of what we would actually do for the next piece, which would be the actually overriding the backend. So I will do that real fast. I'm not going to tell it that it requires stock picking or stock. Well, I might have to, just to be able to get it to load. Should we make a new one called example, or just, I think I'm just going to put it right in here. So this appears to be functioning more or less the way that we were expecting it to work. So let's close that down, go back down into it. I'm going to go ahead and really quickly make a override for stop picking button cancel. So models, actually, let's just do it as quick as possible. Let's say stock.py right in the wrong place here. And from our manifest will need to depend on stock, at least for a hot second. And we're going to def action cancel. And we're going to say super. And that should be that. So we should be able to cancel those stock pickings pretty fast if we include this code. All right, so that one's definitely going to require a restart of Odoo. It will not require a upgrade of Odoo though, because of the fact that this module is already installed, which means it'll look at this class and go ahead and move forward with that. So right now we should have the capability in our new Odoo instance here to be able to cancel all three of these very fast. Let's try it out. On to the second one, cancel. On to the third one, cancel, and back around, and now we have no cancel buttons anymore. Works for me. Does it work for you?
Outstanding.
All right. So it didn't, unfortunately, it wasn't exactly the way that I was hoping to do it. I thought we could try to achieve it through the actions. There may still be a way to actually achieve that. I'm going to go ahead and refactor this to be action manager and change that in the import as well. And maybe call this action manager as well. And why don't we go ahead and return now that we've decided what our JavaScript should actually do. We'll go ahead and return it as the end of it as well. And we could probably lose the console log since we're not in active dev, and it's pretty tiny overall. I can't think of anything that would go wrong with this, other than obviously the need to back out our very small stock override. Okay, looks good to me.
Yep, same.
All right, so I'm gonna get that committed and everything, and thanks for anybody that's watching.
Yep, thank you, everybody.